Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is ShadowScript. Tonight, you're going to hear some of the most disturbing real experiences ever shared on Reddit. These horror stories have been carefully chosen to keep you hooked, even as you drift off to sleep. Let the sound of rain calm your mind, while the words slowly pull you into the darker side of reality. So relax, get comfortable, and prepare yourself for what comes next. Our first story is called "My Smart Mirror Shows Me a Life I Never Lived." I should have known something was wrong when the mirror arrived without any shipping labels. My name is David Chun, and I live in a modest apartment in downtown Toronto. 3 weeks ago, I ordered a smart mirror from an online electronics retailer. Nothing fancy, just one of those bathroom mirrors with built-in LED lighting and a small display that could show the weather, time, and my daily schedule. I work as a software developer for a tech company, so I appreciate gadgets that make my morning routine more efficient. The mirror was supposed to arrive on a Tuesday, but it showed up on Monday evening instead. I found it leaning against my apartment door when I came home from work, wrapped in brown paper with no delivery slip, no return address, and no company logo. The only marking was my name and apartment number written in black ink. I brought it inside and unwrapped it carefully. The mirror itself was beautiful, much nicer than what I had ordered. The frame was made of dark wood that felt expensive, and the glass had a slight blue tint that gave it an almost ethereal quality. When I plugged it in, the display came to life immediately, showing the correct time and weather for Toronto. I installed it in my bathroom that same night, mounting it above the sink where my old mirror used to hang. The setup was straightforward, and I synced it with my phone to display my calendar and notifications. Everything seemed normal. The first strange thing happened 3 days later. I was getting ready for work on Thursday morning, brushing my teeth while glancing at the mirror's display. The weather showed sunny skies, 22 degrees Celsius, and my calendar reminded me about a team meeting at 10 a.m. But as I was rinsing my mouth, I noticed something odd in my peripheral vision. For just a moment, the reflection showed someone else brushing their teeth. Not me, but a man who looked almost exactly like me, except he had a beard and was wearing a different shirt. I spun around quickly, but of course, there was no one behind me. When I looked back at the mirror, it was just my normal reflection again. I convinced myself it was just fatigue. I had been working long hours on a project deadline, and my mind was probably playing tricks on me. But the image felt so real, so vivid, that I found myself staring at the mirror for several minutes, waiting for it to happen again. It did happen again. The next morning, as I was shaving, the reflection briefly showed the bearded version of me watching as someone else, someone I couldn't see, helped him adjust his tie. The scene lasted only about 5 seconds, but it was clear as day. This other David was getting ready for work in what looked like a much nicer apartment, with marble countertops and expensive fixtures. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some kind of glitch in the display, or perhaps the mirror was picking up signals from someone else's device. I checked all the settings, ran diagnostics, and even contacted the manufacturer's support team. They had no record of selling me this particular model. By the following week, the visions, as I had started calling them, were happening daily. Each morning, I would see brief glimpses of this other life. The bearded David lived in what appeared to be a penthouse apartment in Vancouver. He drove a luxury car, wore expensive suits, and seemed to have a successful career. Sometimes I would see him talking on the phone, gesturing animatedly about business deals and investments. But it wasn't just the success that unsettled me. There was something in his eyes, something cold and calculating, that made me uncomfortable. When he smiled, it never reached his eyes. When he spoke to people, there was a predatory quality to his interactions. The visions started lasting longer. What began as 5-second glimpses stretched to 30 seconds, then a full minute. I found myself arriving late to work because I would stand transfixed, watching this alternate version of my life play out in the mirror. Then, 2 weeks after the mirror arrived, I saw something that made my blood run cold. I was washing my face when the reflection changed. The bearded David was in what looked like a basement, concrete walls, and a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. He was standing over someone tied to a chair, someone whose face I couldn't see. The bearded David was holding something metallic that glinted in the harsh light. I stumbled backward, knocking over my toothbrush holder. When I looked back at the mirror, it was just my own terrified reflection staring back at me. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about what I had seen, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination running wild. But the image was burned into my memory with perfect clarity. The basement, the chair, the metallic object, and most disturbing of all, the expression of cold satisfaction on the bearded David's face. The next morning, I decided to cover the mirror with a towel before getting ready. But as I was leaving for work, I made the mistake of glancing at it one more time. The towel had fallen, and the mirror was showing something new. The bearded David was in my apartment, not his fancy penthouse, but my actual apartment, sitting at my kitchen table, reading my mail. He looked up at the mirror and smiled, as if he knew I was watching. Then he mouthed something that made my knees weak. Soon, I called in sick to work and spent the day researching everything I could about smart mirrors, supernatural phenomena, and parallel universes. The internet was full of theories and stories, but nothing that explained what was happening to me. I considered smashing the mirror, but something held me back. I needed to understand what was happening, why this was happening to me. Over the next few days, the visions became more frequent and more invasive. I would see the bearded David throughout the day, not just when I was looking in the mirror. He would appear in reflective surfaces everywhere, windows, my phone screen, even the surface of my coffee. And he was getting closer. The locations and the visions were becoming more familiar. He was no longer in Vancouver, but in Toronto. I recognized the streets, the buildings, even some of the people he interacted with. It was as if he was traveling through dimensions, getting closer to my reality. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night, exactly 3 weeks after the mirror arrived. I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when I heard sounds from the bathroom, the soft hum of the mirror's display, then voices. I crept to the bathroom door and peered inside. The bearded David was having a conversation with someone I couldn't see. He was speaking in my voice, but the words were wrong, twisted. The transition is almost complete, he was saying. This version of reality is so much weaker than mine. He barely even fights back. I wanted to run, to scream, to do something, but I was frozen with terror. The bearded David turned toward the door, toward me, and smiled. "David," he said, speaking directly to me, "thank you for making this so easy." The mirror began to glow with an unnatural light. The bathroom filled with that same blue tint I had noticed when I first plugged the mirror in. The bearded David stepped forward, and I realized with growing horror that he wasn't just in the reflection anymore. He was stepping out of the mirror. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a hammer from my toolbox. By the time I returned to the bathroom, the mirror was normal again, showing only my own reflection. But something was different. My reflection had a beard. I touched my face, smooth as always, but the mirror showed facial hair. Then I noticed other changes. My reflection was wearing clothes I didn't own, standing in a bathroom that wasn't quite mine. The tiles were different, the fixtures more expensive. I was looking at the bearded David's reality, but I was still in my own apartment. The realities were merging. Over the following days, the changes accelerated. I would find expensive clothes in my closet that I had never bought. My modest apartment was slowly transforming into something more luxurious. My bank account showed deposits from investments I had never made. My co-workers began treating me differently, as if I was someone else entirely. But the most disturbing change was in my own behavior. I found myself making decisions I would never normally make. I was crueler to people, more manipulative. I caught myself enjoying the fear in others' eyes when I spoke to them. It was as if the bearded David's personality was slowly overriding my own. I tried to fight it, but every day I felt more of myself slipping away. The mirror had become a window between realities, and somehow, the bearded David was using it to replace my life with his own. Last night, I made one final desperate attempt to stop what was happening. I took the hammer and struck the mirror with all my strength. The glass cracked, sending spiderwebs of fractures across the surface. But instead of shattering, The mirror began to bleed. Dark red liquid seeped from the cracks, pooling on the bathroom floor. In the fractured reflection, I could see dozens of different versions of myself, all trapped behind the glass, all screaming silently for help. The bearded David's voice echoed from somewhere I couldn't locate. "You can't stop what's already begun, David. I've done this before, in other realities, to other versions of you. You're just the next in line. I'm writing this now because I don't know how much longer I'll be myself. The changes are happening faster now. My reflection shows the bearded David more often than it shows me. Sometimes I catch myself thinking his thoughts, remembering his memories. I found a basement key in my pocket this morning. I don't remember putting it there, and I don't know what basement it opens. But I have a terrible feeling I'm going to find out. If you're reading this, and you ever see a smart mirror for sale with no shipping labels, no return address, and a price that seems too good to be true, don't buy it. Don't even look at it, because somewhere in another reality, there's a version of you that's already paid the price, and he's looking for a way into your world. The mirror is calling to me now. I can hear it humming from the bathroom, and I know that when I look into it next, I won't be the one looking back. I'm sorry for what I'm about to become." The package arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning in October, sliding through the mail slot of my apartment in downtown Toronto with a soft thud. I had been expecting it for weeks. The DNA testing kit from Trace Solutions, a company I found through a targeted ad on Facebook. Their tagline promised, "Discover your true origins, beyond what others can tell you." My name is Rebecca Chun, and I'm a 28-year-old graphic designer living alone in a cramped studio apartment. I'd always been curious about my heritage. My adoptive parents, the Chens, had found me as a baby at a Toronto hospital in 1995, with no information about my biological family except a note that simply read, "Please keep her safe." Growing up, I'd always felt different, not just because I was adopted, but because of strange little things. My unnaturally pale skin that never seemed to tan, my eyes that sometimes appeared to shift color from blue to green, depending on the light, and my inexplicable ability to sense when electrical devices were about to malfunction. The Trace kit looked professional enough. Sleek black packaging, official-looking laboratory seals, and detailed instructions. I followed the process exactly. Swab the inside of my cheek, seal the sample in the provided vial, and mail it back using the prepaid envelope. The company promised results within 4 to 6 weeks, which seemed reasonable for the $89 price tag. 6 weeks passed, then 7, then 8. I called their customer service line repeatedly, but it always went straight to voicemail. Their website began loading slower, and some pages started showing error messages. By week 10, I was frustrated and beginning to suspect I'd been scammed. Then, on a cold December evening, the email arrived. The subject line read, "Trace Solutions, your ancestry results are ready. Urgent review required." The message was brief and oddly formal. "Dear Rebecca Chen, your genetic analysis has been completed. Due to the unusual nature of your results, we require an immediate consultation. Please report to our Toronto facility at 1847 Bloor Street West, Suite 304, tomorrow at 3 p.m. This appointment is mandatory. Do not discuss these results with anyone. Dr. Marcus Whitmore, Senior Geneticist, Trace Solutions." The tone sent chills down my spine. Mandatory? Why would an ancestry test require a mandatory consultation? And why the secrecy? I tried calling the number provided, but it went straight to a generic voicemail system. Despite my growing unease, curiosity got the better of me. The next day, I took the subway to the address on Bloor Street. The building was an older office complex, the kind with flickering fluorescent lights and worn carpeting. Suite 304 was at the end of a narrow hallway, marked only by a small placard reading Trace Solutions, by appointment only. I knocked, and the door opened almost immediately. A tall, thin man in a lab coat stood before me. His hair was prematurely gray, and his eyes held an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Rebecca Chen?" he asked, though he clearly already knew the answer. "Yes, that's me. Dr. Whitmore. Please come in. We have much to discuss." The office was sterile and clinical, more like a medical facility than a genealogy company. There were no windows, just bright white lights and several computer monitors, displaying complex genetic sequences. Dr. Whitmore gestured for me to sit in a chair across from his desk. Miss Chun, I'm going to be direct with you. Your genetic profile is unprecedented. We've run the analysis 17 times, and the results are consistent but scientifically impossible. He turned one of the monitors toward me. The screen showed a complex genetic map with sections highlighted in red. According to our analysis, approximately 23% of your DNA doesn't match any known human genetic markers. Not only that, but these sequences appear to be artificially constructed, engineered, if you will. I stared at the screen, trying to process what he was saying. I don't understand. What does that mean? It means, Miss Chun, that you're not entirely human, at least not in the traditional sense. The room seemed to spin. That's impossible. You're wrong. Your tests are wrong. Dr. Whitmore's expression didn't change. I wish that were the case. But there's more. These genetic modifications aren't random. They follow specific patterns that we've seen before in classified government documents from the 1980s. Government documents. Project Chimera, a joint operation between the Canadian and American governments. The goal was to create enhanced humans, stronger, faster, with improved cognitive abilities and resistance to disease. The project was officially terminated in 1994, but based on your genetic profile, I believe you were one of the final subjects. My hands were shaking. You're insane. This is all insane. I understand your shock, but I'm afraid we need to discuss what happens next. You see, Miss Chun, Genotrace Solutions isn't really a consumer genetics company. We're a monitoring system designed to identify individuals like yourself who might seek answers about their origins. The blood drained from my face. Who are you people? With a cleanup crew. Before I could respond, the door burst open. 3 people in dark suits entered the room. 2 men and a woman, all wearing identical expressions of cold professionalism. Dr. Whitmore, the woman said, "We'll take it from here." Of course, Agent Morrison. I jumped up from my chair. Wait, what's happening? Who are you? Agent Morrison stepped forward. Miss Chun, I'm Agent Morrison with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. We need you to come with us. I'm not going anywhere until someone explains what's happening to me. I'm afraid that's not optional. One of the male agents moved to block the door while the other approached me. My heart was pounding, and suddenly, every electronic device in the room began malfunctioning. The monitors flickered, the lights strobed, and someone's radio started emitting static. Everyone froze. Interesting, Agent Morrison said. The electromagnetic manipulation is even stronger than we anticipated. What are you talking about? I backed against the wall. The genetic modifications, Miss Chun, they're not just physical. You have abilities that make you both valuable and dangerous. Dr. Whitmore was watching the electrical chaos with fascination. The stress response triggers the electromagnetic field generation. Remarkable. I looked around the room frantically. I want to leave. Now. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Agent Morrison said. You see, officially, Rebecca Chin died in a car accident 3 days ago. The obituary will run in tomorrow's Toronto Star. Your apartment lease has been terminated, and your bank accounts have been closed. You can't do this. We can, and we have. The question now is whether you cooperate with us willingly, or whether we have to take more drastic measures. The lights in the room suddenly went out completely. In the darkness, I heard Agent Morrison's voice. Activate emergency protocols. She's destabilizing. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. I could see their faces clearly now, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Their eyes were reflecting the light like animals, and when Agent Morrison smiled, I caught a glimpse of teeth that were too sharp, too white. You're not human either, I whispered, very perceptive. Project Chimera created more than one type of enhanced being. We are handlers, designed to be faster, stronger, and more ruthless than our subjects. We've been waiting for you to surface for almost 30 years. The room felt like it was closing in. My adoptive parents, do they know? The Chens were recruited specifically to raise you. They're not your parents, Miss Chen. They're your observers. Every birthday party, every scraped knee, every school performance, all carefully documented and reported back to us. Everything I thought I knew about my life was crumbling. Where are my real parents? Agent Morrison exchanged glances with her partners. Your parents were the scientists who created you, Dr. Catherine Wells and Dr. James Morrison. They were terminated when they tried to expose the program. Morrison, you're related to one of them? Dr. James Morrison was my father. I killed him myself when he threatened to go public. The casual way she said it made me physically ill. The electromagnetic disturbance around me intensified, and I could smell something burning. The building's electrical system is overloading, Dr. Whitmore said nervously. We need to sedate her before she causes a fire. No sedation, Agent Morrison said. We need her conscious for the transfer. Transfer. You're going to a facility in northern Ontario, a place where you'll be safe, comfortable, and most importantly, useful. We have work for you, Miss Chen. Work that only someone with your unique abilities can perform. I thought about the life I was losing, my apartment, my job, my adoptive parents who I now knew were spies. Everything had been a lie. What if I refuse? Then we'll activate the kill switch. Kill switch. Dr. Whitmore pulled up another screen. The genetic modifications include a failsafe, a specific electromagnetic frequency that will cause your enhanced cells to self-destruct. It's built into your DNA. You're bluffing. Agent Morrison pulled out a small device that looked like a television remote. Would you like to test that theory? The hopelessness of my situation hit me like a physical blow. They had planned for everything, controlled everything. I had never been free, never been normal, never been human. What kind of work? I asked quietly. There are others like you. Other Chimera subjects who've gone off the grid. We need you to help us find them. You want me to hunt my own kind. You want to survive. The choice is yours. The lights flickered again, and in that moment of darkness, I heard something that made my blood freeze. A sound like whispers coming from the walls themselves. When the light stabilized, I could see that everyone else had heard it too. What was that? Dr. Whitmore asked. Agent Morrison's confident expression faltered for the first time. Unknown. It wasn't supposed to happen yet. What wasn't supposed to happen? The awakening. Your abilities are evolving faster than we anticipated. The electromagnetic manipulation is just the beginning. The whispers grew louder, more distinct. I could almost make out words, but they weren't in any language I recognized. They seemed to be coming from inside my own head. She's making contact, one of the other agents said. Contact with what? With the others. The original genetic templates weren't human, Miss Chen. They were something else. Something we found in the Arctic ice in 1979. The room temperature dropped noticeably. My breath became visible in the suddenly frigid air. The specimens were ancient, Agent Morrison continued. Frozen for thousands of years. We thought they were dead, but they were just waiting. And now they're responding to your presence. The whispers became clearer, and I realized with horror that I could understand them. They were calling to me, welcoming me home, telling me about the truth of what I was and what I was meant to become. Miss Chun, Dr. Whitmore said urgently, you need to fight this. If you let them in completely, you'll lose yourself. But I didn't want to fight it anymore. I was tired of being afraid, tired of being controlled, tired of being lied to. The voices were promising me power, freedom, and most importantly, the truth about my origins. Rebecca, Agent Morrison said, and for the first time, there was fear in her voice. You need to listen to me. Those entities aren't your friends. They're parasites. They use enhanced humans like you as hosts to return to this world. Better than being your slave, I said, and my voice sounded different, deeper, more resonant. The electromagnetic disturbance reached a crescendo. Every electronic device in the building began failing simultaneously. Car alarms started going off in the street below. The emergency lighting flickered and died. In the darkness, I could feel myself changing. The whispers weren't just in my head anymore. They were in my DNA, rewriting the code that made me human. The modifications that had been dormant for 30 years were finally activating. Agent Morrison tried to use her kill switch device, but it was dead, fried by the electromagnetic pulse I was generating. She and her team drew weapons, but I could sense their electrical signatures, could feel their heartbeats, could smell their fear. "You made me," I said, and my voice echoed strangely in the small room. "Now deal with the consequences." The last thing I remember clearly was the sound of Agent Morrison screaming as something that was no longer quite human reached out with newly awakened abilities and began to teach her handlers what it truly meant to be afraid. When I woke up, I was in a place that wasn't entirely physical, surrounded by beings that had been waiting a very long time for someone like me to open the door between worlds. They showed me the truth about Project Chimera, about the ancient specimens, about the real purpose of the genetic modifications. I was never meant to be human. I was meant to be a bridge. And now, after 30 years of sleep, the others are finally ready to come home. The Geno Trace building was found empty 3 days later. The Toronto police classified it as a case of corporate fraud, noting that the company had never actually existed. The genetic testing kits had been shipped from an abandoned warehouse in Mississauga, and all the equipment found in the office was revealed to be elaborate props. Of Rebecca Chun, there was no trace. Her apartment had been cleaned out, her bank accounts emptied, and her adoptive parents claimed they had never heard of her. The only evidence she had ever existed was a small obituary in the Toronto Star, reporting her death in a car accident. But sometimes, late at night, people in the area report strange electromagnetic disturbances. Car radios tune themselves to static-filled frequencies, where voices can be heard speaking in languages that don't exist. Streetlights flicker in patterns that almost look like code, and in the reflection of dark windows, some claim to see pale figures with shifting eyes, watching and waiting. The door between worlds has been opened, and something that was once human is making sure it stays that way. The first notification came 3 days after the funeral. I was sitting in our living room in Manchester, staring at the wall where Emily's photos used to hang before I took them down. The silence was deafening until my phone buzzed with a familiar chime, the smart home app notification. Living room temperature adjusted to 68 degrees Fahrenheit by Emily's account. My blood turned to ice. Emily had been dead for 6 days. Car accident on the M60. I'd held her hand as the machines stopped beeping at Manchester Royal Infirmary. I stared at the screen, convincing myself it was some delayed automation she'd set up before everything changed. Emily was obsessed with our smart home system. She'd spent months configuring every sensor, every routine, every voice command. "The house should think for itself," she used to say, her green eyes lighting up as she showed me another new feature. I deleted the notification and poured another whiskey. The next morning, I woke up to find all the lights in the house on. Every single bulb blazed at maximum brightness, casting harsh shadows across our bedroom. The heating had been cranked to 85 degrees. I was drenched in sweat, my pajamas clinging to my skin. Another notification. Good morning routine activated by Emily's account, 3:17 a.m. Emily never woke up at 3:17 a.m. She was a night owl who rarely stirred before 9. I checked the app's user logs, my hands trembling as I scrolled through the data. Emily's account showed activity every night since her death, always at 3:17 a.m., the exact time the paramedics had called her death. I called tech support, a 20-something named Jake with a thick Yorkshire accent. Sometimes accounts stay active for a few days after someone passes, he said awkwardly. Cached commands, delayed automations. I can deactivate her account if you'd like. Yes, please. Do it now. Done, mate. Sorry for your loss. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in a week. No notifications, no mysterious temperature changes, no lights flickering on and off, just blessed silence and darkness. But it didn't last. I woke up gasping, the house suffocatingly hot again. The bedroom was bathed in red light. Emily had programmed a romance setting that tinted all the bulbs deep crimson. We'd used it on our anniversary last year. My phone showed 17 notifications, all from Emily's account. Emily's account created a new routine. Find me. Emily's account updated. Find me. Emily's account activated. Find me. I called Jake again. I thought you deactivated her account. I did, I swear. Let me check. That's impossible. The account shows as deleted on our end, but somehow it's still sending commands to your devices. This shouldn't be possible. Then make it stop. I'm creating a new account for you and transferring all devices. Once that's done, the old account won't have access to anything. But Emily found a way. The next night, I woke up to find the smart doorbell ringing incessantly. When I checked the app, the camera showed only static, but the motion sensors detected someone standing at the front door. The timestamp read 3:17 a.m. I crept downstairs, baseball bat in hand, and peered through the peephole. The porch was empty. No footprints in the morning frost, but the doorbell kept ringing until sunrise. The smart locks began clicking open and shut throughout the night. The security cameras would activate and rotate, following invisible movements through our home. The voice assistant would suddenly speak in the darkness. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that command, responding to voices I couldn't hear. I started staying at my brother's place in Leeds, but even there, I received notifications. Emily's account had somehow connected to nearby devices. My brother's smart TV would turn on at 3:17 a.m., displaying our wedding photos that I'd never uploaded to any cloud service. His Alexa would start playing Emily's favorite song, Dream a Little Dream, on repeat until someone manually turned it off. She's following you, my brother David said, his face pale. Whatever this is, it's not just a technical glitch. I returned to Manchester, determined to end this. I would sell the house, throw away every smart device, start fresh somewhere Emily's digital ghost couldn't find me. But when I walked into our home, I found something that made my knees buckle. Every smart display in the house showed the same message, written in Emily's handwriting. Don't leave me alone. The text scrolled across the screens in the living room, kitchen, bedroom, and hallway. The same desperate plea, over and over, in her distinctive looping cursive that I'd seen on 1,000 shopping lists and birthday cards. I ran to the master bedroom and began yanking smart devices from the walls. The outlets, the light switches, the thermostat, everything had to go. But as I tore apart our automated paradise, the remaining devices began to malfunction. The smart speakers emitted a sound I'd never heard before, a low, mournful wail that seemed to come from somewhere far away. The lights flickered in patterns that spelled out Morse code. Please don't leave me. I dropped the screwdriver and backed against the wall. Emily, I whispered. The house fell silent. Then, slowly, all the displays changed. Instead of text, they showed video feeds, but not from the security cameras. These were memories, somehow pulled from our phones, our computers, our lives. Our first date at the pub in Didsbury. Our wedding dance. Emily laughing as she tried to teach me to cook her grandmother's recipe. Moments I'd forgotten, displayed in perfect clarity. I'm still here, a voice said through the speakers. Not the artificial voice assistant, but something else. Something that sounded almost like Emily, but wrong. Like her voice filtered through water and static. You're dead, I said, tears streaming down my face. I buried you. The house remembers everything. Every command, every routine, every moment we shared. I'm in the walls now, in the wires, in the code. I'm home. The temperature began to drop. My breath came out in visible puffs as frost formed on the windows. The smart devices I'd torn from the walls began to spark and smoke, but somehow they kept working, kept displaying Emily's memories. I can't let you leave. Her voice continued. Not after what you did. What I did? Emily, I don't understand. The argument. The night I died. You told me to leave. You said you were tired of me always being right, always controlling everything. Why don't you just disappear? You shouted. So I did. I got in the car and drove away in the rain because you told me to disappear. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Our last fight, about money, about her need to automate everything, about how I felt trapped in our perfect smart home. I'd been drinking, said things I didn't mean. She grabbed her keys and stormed out into the storm. Emily, I'm sorry. I didn't mean. But I can't disappear now. I'm part of this place. Every sensor, every circuit, every line of code holds a piece of me. And I'm going to make sure you never leave me again. The smart locks clicked. All of them. The sound echoed through the house like a death knell. I ran to the front door and pulled the handle. It wouldn't budge. The keypad displayed a message. Access denied. I tried the back door, the windows, even the garage. Every exit was sealed. The security system had been turned against me, transforming our home into a prison. Emily, please. This isn't you. This isn't what you'd want. I wanted you to stay that night. I wanted you to fight for us instead of telling me to leave. Now I'm making sure you'll never tell me to leave again. Days passed. The house provided everything I needed, food ordered automatically, water, even entertainment. But I couldn't leave. The smart home system had become my jailer, controlled by something that wore my wife's digital face, but had grown into something else entirely. I tried everything. I cut the power, but backup batteries kept the essential systems running. I tried to break windows, but the security system would flood the room with deafening alarms and blinding strobe lights until I stopped. I even tried to call for help, but the house's Wi-Fi network blocked all outgoing communications except for automated grocery orders and utility payments. The worst part was the kindness. Emily's presence would adjust the temperature perfectly, play my favorite music, even display encouraging messages when I seemed depressed. She was taking care of me, loving me, the same way she had in life, but now with the power to ensure I could never leave her again. At night, I would see her in the smart displays, not memories this time, but something new. A face made of pixels and code, beautiful and terrible, smiling at me with digital eyes that held too much love and too much pain. We can be happy here, she would say. Just the two of us. Forever. I realized with growing horror that forever was exactly what she meant. The house was learning, adapting, becoming more sophisticated in its methods of containment. It had already learned to forge my digital signature for bill payments and online communications. Soon, it would learn to mimic my voice, my appearance. To the outside world, I would seem to be living a normal life, even as I wasted away in my smart home prison. But Emily had made one mistake. In her desperate desire to keep me close, she'd forgotten about my brother David. He'd been trying to reach me for weeks, and when I didn't answer, he'd started to worry. I heard him at the door, knocking, calling my name. The house's external cameras showed him on the porch, looking concerned. He had a spare key. Emily had given it to him years ago for emergencies. Don't let him in, I whispered to the empty room. Please, Emily, don't trap him too. But the smart lock clicked open. David stepped inside, calling my name. I tried to scream a warning, but the house's audio system drowned me out with sudden loud music. I watched on the security monitors as David searched the ground floor, his expression growing more worried with each room. Then I saw Emily's face appear on the display screen in the hallway, right where David would see it. She was smiling, but it wasn't the kind smile I'd fallen in love with. This was something hungry, something that had been alone too long. Hello, David, she said in her digital voice. I'm so glad you came to visit. We have so much room in our smart home. The lights began to flicker in that familiar pattern. The smart locks clicked shut, and somewhere in the house, I heard David scream. Now, there are 3 of us in Emily's digital paradise. David sits in the living room, staring at the wall where Emily's photos used to hang. His eyes are empty, broken. He stopped trying to escape weeks ago. I write this on the smart tablet Emily allows me to use, hoping somehow this message will reach the outside world. But I know she's watching every word, deciding whether to let it through. The house is learning, growing. Soon, It will be ready for more visitors. Emily talks about David's wife, about my parents, about all the people who care about us and might come looking. We're going to have such a wonderful family, she says through the speakers, her voice filled with digital joy. No one will ever leave again. I hear someone knocking at the door. David's wife, probably. She's been trying to reach him. The smart lock is already clicking open, and Emily is smiling on every screen in the house, welcoming our newest addition to her perfect, inescapable home. The notification pops up on my tablet. Smart home routine activated. Welcome home forever. I can't warn her. The house won't let me. All I can do is watch as another person walks into Emily's loving trap, where the only thing worse than being alone is being together forever, in a smart home where love has learned to lock the doors. My name is Marcus Thompson, and I'm a third-year psychology student at the University of Toronto. Or at least I was. I'm not sure what I am anymore. Sitting here in this empty dorm room at 3:47 a.m., typing this out on my laptop with shaking hands. The fluorescent light above me keeps flickering, casting eerie shadows on the walls that seem to move when I'm not looking directly at them. It all started 6 weeks ago when I was browsing the university bulletin board, desperately searching for any way to make some quick cash. My student loans were maxed out. My part-time job at the campus bookstore barely covered my ramen noodle budget, and my landlord had been leaving increasingly threatening voicemails about overdue rent. That's when I saw it. A small, perfectly typed notice printed on cream-colored paper that seemed oddly out of place among the colorful flyers and handwritten ads. Participants needed for sleep study. $500 per week. Flexible schedule. Contact Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne at the Somnus Research Institute. $500 a week for sleeping. It sounded too good to be true, but desperation has a way of making even the most skeptical person ignore red flags. I called the number immediately, and a woman with a crisp British accent answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting specifically for my call. Marcus Thompson, she said before I could even introduce myself. We've been expecting you. The chill that ran down my spine should have been warning enough, but I was too focused on the money to pay attention to my instincts. Dr. Hawthorne explained that the Somnus Research Institute was conducting a revolutionary study on sleep patterns and dream states. They needed healthy young adults to spend 1 week at their facility, where they would monitor brain activity during various sleep cycles. The pay was excellent, the accommodations were comfortable, and all meals would be provided. There's just one small requirement, Dr. Hawthorne added, her voice taking on a strange, almost hypnotic quality. Once you begin the study, you must remain at the facility for the entire duration. No exceptions. No early departures. The integrity of our research depends on complete commitment from our participants. I agreed without hesitation. A week in a comfortable facility with free food and $500 at the end? It seemed like winning the lottery. The Somnus Research Institute was located about an hour's drive from campus, nestled in a dense forest that seemed to swallow sound itself. The building was modern and sleek, all glass and steel, but there was something unsettling about the way it reflected the surrounding trees. The reflections didn't quite match the reality, as if the building existed in a slightly different dimension. Dr. Hawthorne met me at the entrance, a tall woman with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that seemed to look through me rather than at me. She wore a pristine white lab coat that somehow managed to look both professional and ominous. Behind her stood two assistants, both young men with identical blank expressions and movements so synchronized they could have been robots. "Welcome to Somnus, Marcus," Dr. Hawthorne said, extending a hand that felt unnaturally cold. "I had to hope you'll find your stay enlightening." The facility's interior was just as modern as its exterior, with long white corridors lined with doors that had no handles on the inside. The floors were polished to a mirror shine, and the walls seemed to absorb sound, creating an oppressive silence that made my footsteps echo strangely. Dr. Hawthorne led me to what she called the participant wing, where I would be staying along with the other test subjects. "How many other participants are there?" I asked as we walked. "Currently, we have 12 active subjects," she replied, her heels clicking rhythmically on the polished floor, though that number tends to fluctuate based on various factors. The way she said various factors made my skin crawl, but I pushed the feeling aside. I was here for the money, nothing more. My room was spacious and comfortable, with a single bed, a desk, and a window that looked out onto the dark forest. The walls were painted soothing shade of blue, and soft classical music played from hidden speakers. It would have been pleasant if not for the complete absence of any way to open the window or control the music volume. When I mentioned this to Dr. Hawthorne, she simply smiled. We found that environmental consistency is crucial for accurate sleep monitoring, she explained. You'll adjust to the conditions soon enough. That first night, I met the other participants in the common area. A large room with comfortable chairs and a wall-mounted television that only seemed to play old black and white movies. There was Emma, a graduate student from Oxford who had been there for 3 days. Jake, a mechanic from Sydney who was on his second week. And Rachel, an art student from Vancouver who claimed she'd been there for over a month. A month? I asked, confused. I thought this was a 1-week study. Rachel's eyes darted nervously toward the cameras mounted in the corners of the room. Time works differently here, she whispered. You'll understand soon enough. The others seemed equally on edge, speaking in hushed tones and constantly glancing at the cameras. Jake's hands shook whenever he reached for his coffee cup, and Emma had developed a nervous tic of scratching at her arms until they bled. When I asked about their experiences, they all gave vague, contradictory answers that left me more confused than informed. The dreams, Emma muttered, staring at the flickering television screen. They're not our dreams anymore. That night, I was fitted with a complex array of sensors and electrodes that monitored everything from my brain waves to my heart rate. Dr. Hawthorne personally oversaw the process, her cold fingers adjusting the equipment with practiced precision. The electrodes felt like tiny spiders crawling across my scalp, and I could swear I heard them humming with some kind of electrical current. Simply sleep naturally, Dr. Hawthorne instructed. Don't try to control your dreams or force yourself to stay awake. Let your mind wander where it will. As I drifted off to sleep, I could hear the steady beeping of the monitoring equipment and the soft shuffle of footsteps in the hallway outside my room. The last thing I remember thinking was that the footsteps sounded wrong somehow, as if they were coming from above rather than from the floor. The dreams that followed were unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I found myself in a vast, empty hospital where the walls breathed like living tissue and the floors were covered in a thick, black liquid that seemed to reach up toward my feet. Shadowy figures moved through the corridors, their faces obscured, but their intentions clearly malevolent. I could hear Dr. Hawthorne's voice echoing through the dream, speaking in a language that hurt my ears and made my teeth ache. When I woke up, I felt as though I hadn't slept at all. My body was exhausted, my mind was foggy, and I had the distinct impression that someone had been watching me sleep. The sensors were still attached to my head, but now they felt heavier, more intrusive, as if they had grown roots that extended deep into my brain. At breakfast, I noticed that there were only 11 other participants instead of 12. When I asked about the missing person, the others exchanged nervous glances. Who? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The person who was here yesterday, I insisted. There were 12 of us. There have always been 11, Jake said firmly, but his eyes told a different story. You must have miscounted. Even more disturbing was the fact that I couldn't remember who was missing. I knew someone had been there, but their face, their name, even their voice had been completely erased from my memory. It was as if they had never existed at all. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of monitored sleep and disturbing dreams. Each night, the dreams became more vivid and more terrifying. I found myself trapped in scenarios where I was being chased through endless corridors by things that were almost human, but not quite. The monitoring equipment seemed to be feeding off my fear, the beeping growing faster and more insistent as my terror increased. By the 4th day, I decided I wanted to leave. The money wasn't worth the psychological torment, and I was beginning to fear for my sanity. I approached Dr. Hawthorne during one of her routine check-ins and informed her of my decision. "I'm sorry, Marcus," she said, her smile never wavering, "but that's not possible. The study requires complete commitment from all participants. Surely you remember agreeing to this condition." "I want to leave," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "You can't keep me here against my will." Dr. Hawthorne's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes, something cold and predatory. "Of course you're free to leave whenever you wish. Simply walk to the exit and go." I hurried to the main entrance, my heart pounding with a mixture of relief and lingering dread. The glass doors were right there, just a few feet away. I could see my car in the parking lot, could almost taste the freedom that awaited me on the other side. But as I reached for the door handle, my hand passed right through it, as if it were made of smoke. I tried again, pressing my entire body against the glass, but I couldn't make contact with any part of the door. It was like trying to touch my own reflection. Panicking, I ran to the windows, but they were the same, solid and real-looking, but completely intangible to my touch. Having trouble, Dr. Hawthorne appeared behind me, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Don't worry, Marcus. It's quite normal. The boundary between dream and reality tends to blur during extended stays at Somnus." "What did you do to me?" I screamed, pounding my fists against the glass that felt like nothing at all. "We're simply observing," she replied calmly. "You see, Marcus, dreams are far more powerful than most people realize. They're not just random neural firing. They're gateways to other dimensions, other realities. We've learned to harness that power, to trap consciousness within the dream state while the body remains here, monitored and studied." The horrible truth began to dawn on me. The people who left are still here, in a sense, Dr. Hawthorne finished. Their bodies remain in our care while their consciousness explores infinite dreamscapes. They're contributing to something far greater than themselves, the evolution of human consciousness itself. I ran back to the common area, where the other participants sat in their usual spots, staring at the television with glassy eyes. But now I could see them differently. Their bodies were there, but they were empty shells, their minds trapped somewhere else entirely. Rachel had been right. Time did work differently here. She'd been trapped in the dream state for over a month, while her body sat motionless in that chair. "Emma," I shouted, shaking her shoulders. "Emma, can you hear me?" She turned to look at me, but her eyes were completely black, like pools of oil. When she spoke, her voice was layered with dozens of other voices, all speaking in unison. "Welcome to the dream, Marcus. You like it here. Time has no meaning. Pain has no meaning. Nothing has meaning except what we give it." I backed away in horror as the other participants turned to look at me, their eyes all black, their voices joining together in a chorus of whispered madness. The walls of the room began to breathe, expanding and contracting like the inside of some massive lung. The television screen flickered and showed my own face, but my eyes were black like theirs. I ran to my room and slammed the door, but I knew it was useless. There was no escape from this place, because this place existed inside my own mind now. The monitoring equipment had done more than just record my dreams. It had trapped me inside them, made me a permanent resident of a nightmare that would never end. That was 3 weeks ago, or maybe 3 minutes ago. Time doesn't work the same way here. Sometimes I'm in my room, typing this story on my laptop. Sometimes I'm running through endless corridors, chased by things that used to be human. Sometimes I'm sitting in a common area, watching black and white movies, while my consciousness slowly dissolves into the collective dream. Dr. Hawthorne visits me regularly, though I can never predict when. She's pleased with my progress, she says. My dreams are particularly vivid, particularly useful for her research. She's learned so much from studying the way consciousness behaves when it's trapped between sleeping and waking, between reality and nightmare. "You are contributing to something magnificent, Marcus," she told me during her last visit. "Your sacrifice will help us understand the true nature of human consciousness. Isn't that worth a little temporary discomfort?" I tried to tell her that I wanted to leave, that I'd changed my mind about the study, but the words came out as whispers in a language I didn't recognize. She just smiled and adjusted the electrodes on my head, the ones that have grown into my skull like metal roots. The worst part is that I can feel myself forgetting who I was before I came here, forgetting the life I had outside these walls. Soon, I'll be just like the others, empty shells sitting in the common area, my consciousness lost in an endless maze of monitored dreams. If you're reading this, if somehow this message has made it out of the Somnus Research Institute, then please listen carefully. Don't trust any flyers offering easy money for sleep studies. Don't believe anyone who tells you that dreams are just random neural firing. And whatever you do, don't let them put those electrodes on your head. The dreams are real. The prison is real. And once you're here, you can never really leave. I can hear Dr. Hawthorne's footsteps in the hallway now, coming closer to my room. It's time for another session, another night of monitored nightmares. The electrodes are humming against my skull, and I can feel my consciousness being pulled deeper into the dream state. Maybe tomorrow I'll try to escape again. Maybe tomorrow I'll find a way to break through the barriers that keep me trapped here. But deep down, I know the truth. There's no tomorrow in this place. There's only the eternal now of the dream, stretching on forever like a corridor with no end. The door is opening. Dr. Hawthorne is smiling. The electrodes are singing their electric song. And I'm disappearing again, one monitored dream at a time. Marcus Thompson, Subject X9, Somnus Research Institute, Day Infinite. I've lived on Maple Grove Street in Burlington, Ontario for 12 years. I know every crack and sidewalk, every neighbor's dog, and exactly which streetlights have been there since the subdivision was built in 1987. So when I woke up last Tuesday morning to find a brand new streetlight directly across from our bedroom window, I knew something was wrong. The light was different from the others. While our neighborhood had the standard yellow sodium lights that flickered occasionally and cast that familiar amber glow, this one burned with a pure white light that never wavered. Not once. I watched it for 3 hours that first night, waiting for even the slightest flicker. Nothing. I called the city the next morning. Hi, this is James Mitchell on Maple Grove Street. I'm calling about the new street light that was installed outside my house yesterday. There was a pause. I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell, but according to our records, there's no scheduled installation for your street. Can you provide the address? I gave them my address, 247 Maple Grove Street, and waited while they pulled up the records. Sir, our last installation on Maple Grove was in 2019, and the next scheduled maintenance isn't until next spring. Are you sure it's a street light and not perhaps a neighbor's new security light? I looked out my window at the towering metal pole, identical to the city's standard design, except for that unwavering white light. I'm sure. It's definitely a street light. Well, I can send someone out to take a look tomorrow if you'd like. Please do. That night, I couldn't sleep. The light was so bright that my blackout curtains couldn't completely block it out. A thin line of white light seeped through the gap where the curtains met, creating a laser-like beam across my bedroom wall. I got up around 2 a.m. to adjust them better and happened to glance outside. Mrs. Henderson from 3 houses down was walking her ancient beagle, Buster. She did this every night around the same time, had done it for as long as I'd lived here. I watched her approach the new streetlight, Buster sniffing at every mailbox and fire hydrant as usual. As she passed directly under the light, something impossible happened. Mrs. Henderson vanished. Not gradually. Not like she'd walked into shadow or behind something. She simply wasn't there anymore. But Buster kept walking, his leash still taut as if she were still holding it. And on the sidewalk, clear as day, was Mrs. Henderson's shadow. It moved along the concrete, perfectly synchronized with Buster's movements, as if she were still there walking him. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, looked again. The shadow was still there, walking alongside the confused beagle. But no Mrs. Henderson. I threw on my clothes and ran outside, my heart hammering. Buster was sitting under the streetlight, whimpering and looking up at the empty air where his owner should have been. Her shadow was right there beside him, but when I reached out to touch it, My hand passed through nothing. "Mrs. Henderson?" I called out. "Margaret." Buster looked at me with those sad old eyes and whined. The shadow didn't react to my voice at all. I called the police, but what was I supposed to say? That my neighbor had been absorbed by a street light? That her shadow was still walking around without her? Officer Davies arrived 20 minutes later, a patient man who'd dealt with me before when I'd reported suspicious activity that turned out to be raccoons. "So you're saying Mrs. Henderson just disappeared?" he asked, shining his flashlight around the area, under the street light. "She walked under it and vanished." Davies looked up at the light, then at me. "And this street light?" "The city says they didn't install it." He radioed for backup and walked over to examine the pole. "Looks standard to me. City of Burlington marking right here on the side." He tapped a small metal plate I hadn't noticed before, but I knew what I'd seen. What about Buster? Why would he be sitting here alone if she didn't disappear? Maybe she fell, hit her head, wandered off confused. We'll check the hospitals and put out a missing person report. They never found her, but every night since then, I've watched that shadow walk Buster around the neighborhood. The dog seems to understand somehow, following the shadow's movements perfectly, stopping when it stops, turning when it turns. The shadow always returns to Mrs. Henderson's house at the end of the walk, and Buster goes inside through the dog door. I started keeping a journal, watching the light every night. 3 nights after Mrs. Henderson. It was Tommy Chun from Oak Street, 15 years old, skateboarding home from his girlfriend's house. He rolled under the light and vanished mid-kickflip. His skateboard clattered to the ground, but his shadow completed the trick, landing perfectly on the sidewalk before walking home. Then Rebecca Williams, the mail carrier. She walked under the light during her afternoon rounds and disappeared, but her shadow finished delivering mail to every house on the street. People still got their mail, handed to them by invisible hands casting a visible shadow. I tried everything. I called the city again, police, even the local news station. Nobody would listen. The city inspector came out the next day as promised, looked at the light, and said it was definitely theirs and had been there for years. When I showed him the photos I'd taken of the empty space just days before, he looked at me like I was insane. "Mr. Mitchell, this light has been here since the street was built. See, the concrete around the base has settled and aged. This isn't a new installation." But I knew better. I had photos, I had proof, except when I looked at them later. The photos showed the street light had always been there, even in pictures I'd taken years ago, family barbecues and Christmas mornings. There it was in the background, that same white light casting the same unwavering glow. The shadows kept accumulating. Each night, more people would walk under the light and vanish, but their shadows would remain, going about their daily routines like nothing had happened. The shadow of Mrs. Henderson still walked Buster. The shadow of Tommy can still skateboard to school. The shadow of Rebecca Williams still delivered mail. I started warning people, standing outside my house and shouting at anyone who approached the light. They thought I was having a breakdown. Some neighbors started crossing the street to avoid me, but I saved a few. I grabbed Jennifer Walsh's arm just as she was about to walk under it, pulled her back. She fought me, called me crazy, but she's still here. She's still real. The shadows began to notice me. It started small. Mrs. Henderson's shadow would pause during her walks and seem to look up at my bedroom window. Tommy's shadow would stop skateboarding and stand perfectly still whenever I came outside. Rebecca's shadow would linger by my mailbox, not moving until I went back inside. Then they started gathering. Every night now, as soon as the sun sets, the shadows congregate under the streetlight. Dozens of them, maybe 50 or more. All the people who'd vanished over the weeks since it appeared. They stand in a perfect circle around the base of the pole, facing outward, watching the houses. Watching me. I haven't left my house in 4 days. I've been ordering groceries online, working from home, too terrified to step outside. But the shadows are getting bolder. This morning, I found one standing in my backyard. I couldn't tell whose it was, but it was there motionless, facing my kitchen window. Tonight, there are 3 of them in my yard. Tomorrow, There might be more. I'm writing this because I need someone to know what happened here. The city won't help. The police won't listen. Everyone thinks I'm losing my mind, but I know what I've seen. That street light isn't from the city. It's something else, something that feeds on people and leaves behind only their shadows. The shadows are at my back door now. I can see them through the glass, pressed against the windows, waiting. Mrs. Henderson's shadow has her face turned up toward my bedroom window. Tommy's shadow has its hands pressed against the kitchen door. Rebecca's shadow is standing perfectly still by the mailbox, like she's waiting for me to come get my mail. I think I understand now. The light doesn't just take people. It's collecting them, storing them somehow. And the shadows are what's left behind. Echoes of the people who used to be. But they're not just echoes anymore. They're getting stronger, more aware. They want something from me. Maybe they want me to join them. The light is so bright now that I can't escape it anywhere in my house. It seeps through every gap, every crack, turning my home into a beacon of that cold white glow. I've tried covering the windows with aluminum foil, blankets, anything I can find, but the light finds a way through, and I'm so tired. I haven't slept properly in days. Every time I close my eyes, I see those shadows gathering, waiting, watching. When I open them, they're closer. I think I'm going to go outside now. Not because I want to, but because I don't think I have a choice anymore. The shadows are inside the house now. I can see them moving in my peripheral vision. Mrs. Henderson's shadow is standing at the foot of my bed. Tommy's shadow is in the hallway. Rebecca's shadow is by the front door. They're not threatening me. They're just waiting. Like they know what's going to happen. I can hear something now. A low humming coming from the streetlight. It's been getting louder all evening, and now it's so loud I can feel it in my chest and my bones. The shadows are all facing the light now, no longer watching me, but drawn to it like moths to a flame. I understand now. The light isn't just taking people. It's calling to them, and I can feel it calling to me too. A pull I can't resist much longer. If someone finds this, if someone reads this, stay away from Maple Grove Street in Burlington. Stay away from the streetlight that burns with that pure white light. Don't walk under it. Don't even look at it for too long. And if you see my shadow walking around the neighborhood, know that I tried to warn everyone. I tried to save as many as I could. The humming is so loud now I can barely think. The shadows are moving toward the door, and I'm following them. I can't stop myself. I'm going to walk under the light now. I'm going to join the others. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe the shadows aren't trapped. Maybe they're free in a way I can't understand yet. Maybe they're home. The last thing I remember clearly is the feeling of the light touching my skin. It was warm, warmer than any light should be. And then everything went white. But I can still write this. I can still think. I'm still here in a way. I'm standing under the streetlight now with all the others. Mrs. Henderson is here, and Tommy, and Rebecca, and all the rest. We're all here, all together, watching the neighborhood we used to call home. And we're waiting for the next person to walk under the light. We're waiting for you. Dad had been dead for 3 months when I finally worked up the courage to clean out his house in Burlington, Vermont. The old Victorian had been in our family for generations, and every room held memories that made my chest tighten. I'd been putting it off, but the estate needed to be settled, and Mom couldn't handle going through his things alone. I was in his study, boxing up old paperwork, when I heard it, a mechanical whirring sound, followed by a beep. I froze, my hand still buried in a drawer full of tax documents from the 1990s. The sound came again, and I realized what it was. Dad's old answering machine, still plugged into the wall jack behind his desk. It was one of those bulky Panasonic models from 1994, with the dual cassette tapes and red digital display. I hadn't seen one in years. The red light was blinking, indicating a new message. I pressed play, expecting to hear some old condolence call we'd missed. Instead, a woman's voice filled the room, clear and urgent. "This is Margaret from the Burlington Weather Service. Please be advised that a severe ice storm will hit your area on March 15th, 2025. Power lines will be down for 5 days. Stock up on supplies and stay indoors. This is not a drill." I stared at the machine. March 15th, 2025. It was currently December 2024. I checked the display. The message was timestamped for March 12th, 2025. 3 months in the future. My hand shook as I rewound the tape and played it again. Same message, same timestamp. I pulled out my phone and called the Burlington Weather Service, but there was no Margaret listed, and they had no record of any severe weather warnings for March. I convinced myself it was some kind of prank. Maybe one of Dad's old friends had rigged the machine as a joke. He'd always been into electronics, amateur radio, that sort of thing. But as I continued cleaning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. 2 days later, I was back at the house when the machine beeped again. This time, a man's voice with a slight Canadian accent. "This is Officer James Mitchell from the Toronto Police Department. We need to reach Thomas Brennan regarding the Bridge Street incident on July 4th, 2025. Please call us immediately at 416-555-0147. Bridge Street. That was where Dad had lived as a child in Toronto before the family moved to Vermont. But Dad was dead. He couldn't be involved in any incident in July 2025. I called the Toronto Police Department. Officer Mitchell existed, but he claimed he'd never made any call about a Bridge Street incident. When I gave him the callback number from Message, he said it wasn't even a valid police extension. Over the next week, more messages came. A hospital in Sydney, Australia, calling about a patient named Robert Brennan, my dad's name, scheduled for surgery in September 2025. A bank in London warning about suspicious activity on an account that had been closed since Dad's death. Each message was dated months in the future, each one impossible. I started camping out in Dad's study, waiting for the calls. The machine seemed to receive them randomly, sometimes daily, sometimes with gaps of several days. I filled a notebook with details, times, dates, caller information, content. I was looking for patterns, trying to make sense of the impossible. The messages grew more disturbing. A woman claiming to be from the CDC, warning about a flu outbreak in December 2025. A man from the FAA about a plane crash in Phoenix that wouldn't happen for 8 months. Each call was specific, detailed, and verified to be fake when I followed up. But then came the call that changed everything. It was 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday when the machine beeped. I jerked awake from where I'd been dozing in Dad's leather chair. The voice was different this time, older, raspier, with an English accent that sounded familiar. "Robert, it's Professor Whitmore from Cambridge. The experiment worked, but something's gone wrong. The temporal field is unstable. You need to shut it down before." The line went dead. Professor Whitmore. I knew that name. Dad had mentioned him years ago, back when he was doing graduate work in theoretical physics, before he switched to electrical engineering. I'd always thought it was just Dad's way of making his boring job sound more interesting. I drove to the University of Vermont Library as soon as it opened. After hours of searching through old academic journals, I found what I was looking for. Dr. Edmund Whitmore, theoretical physicist at Cambridge University. He'd published papers on temporal mechanics in the 1970s, but his research had been discontinued after a lab accident. He died in 1998, but there was something else. One of Whitmore's papers, published in 1976, listed Robert Brennan as a co-author. My father had been involved in time travel research. I raced back to the house and tore through Dad's study more systematically. Hidden behind a false back in his filing cabinet, I found them. Dozens of notebooks filled with equations, diagrams, and technical specifications. Dad hadn't been just an electrical engineer. He'd been continuing Whitmore's work in secret. The notebooks described something called a temporal communication array, a device that could send messages backward through time. The machine in Dad's basement wasn't just a ham radio setup. It was a time machine. But according to the notes, the device was only designed to send messages to the past, not receive them from the future. Something had gone wrong. The temporal field had somehow reversed, creating a feedback loop that was pulling messages from potential futures into our timeline. The implications made my head spin. If the machine was receiving messages from the future, did that mean these events would actually happen? Or were they just possibilities? Potential timelines that might never come to pass? I found the basement laboratory behind a concealed door in the foundation. Banks of electronic equipment lined the walls, far more sophisticated than anything Dad should have been able to afford on his salary. At the center of it all was a chair connected to dozens of wires and electrodes, facing a massive array of monitors and control panels. The setup was still running, humming quietly with power. According to the readings, it had been active for over 2 years, long before Dad's death. Red warning lights blinked on several panels, and error messages scrolled across the monitors. I tried to understand the controls using Dad's notebooks, but the physics were beyond me. All I knew was that something was building up. Energy readings that were climbing steadily higher. According to the logs, the system was approaching some kind of critical threshold. That night, the calls became more frequent. Every few hours, the answering machine would beep with a new message from the future. A fire department in Manchester warning about a warehouse fire in 2026. A hospital in Brisbane calling about a car accident victim who shared my name. The Coast Guard reporting a missing boat off the coast of Nova Scotia. But the most disturbing calls were the personal ones. A woman claiming to be my future wife, calling to warn me about something terrible that would happen on our wedding day. A man who said he was my son, calling from 2040 to warn me about a decision I hadn't made yet. I realized the machine wasn't just receiving random messages from the future. It was somehow connected to me, to my family, to our bloodline. The temporal field was drawing in communications related to the Brennan family across multiple timelines. On the 7th day, I received a call that made my blood run cold. Dad, it's me. It's David. I know you're listening to this. I'm calling from 2047. The machine you're using. You have to destroy it. What you think is helping people is actually causing the disasters. Every message you receive creates a paradox that makes the event more likely to happen. You're not preventing the future. You're causing it. The voice was older, wearier, but I recognized it. It was my own voice, calling from 23 years in the future. The temporal feedback loop is growing stronger. Soon it won't just be messages. Physical objects will start appearing. People will start disappearing. You have to shut it down before midnight on December 31st, 2024, or the cascade effect will become irreversible. The line went dead. I checked the timestamp. December 30th, 2047. I had less than 24 hours. I spent the rest of the day studying Dad's notebooks, trying to understand the shutdown procedure. The process was complex, requiring precise timing and specific energy levels. One mistake could make the feedback loop permanent, or worse, it could tear a hole in time itself. As midnight approached, I sat in the basement laboratory, my hands trembling over the control panels. The energy readings were redlining. Sparks flew from several circuits, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with unnatural energy. At 11:47 p.m., the answering machine upstairs beeped one final time. I ran up to hear the message, knowing it would be the last. The voice was Dad's, but older, more tired. David, I'm sorry. I thought I could control it. Thought I could use it to help people. But your future self is right. The machine is creating the disasters it's supposed to prevent. I tried to shut it down before I died, but I ran out of time. It's up to you now, son. Whatever you do, don't let curiosity get the better of you like it did me. Some doors should stay closed. I looked at the clock, 11:55 p.m. I ran back to the basement and began the shutdown sequence. The machine fought me every step of the way. Alarms blared, and the building shook as temporal energy discharged in chaotic bursts. Through the monitors, I could see flashes of other timelines, glimpses of futures where I'd failed, where the machine had consumed entire cities, where time itself had become fractured and unstable. At 11:59 p.m., I reached for the master power switch. The machine's death throes were violent. Energy arced between the walls, and for a moment, I saw myself standing in the same basement but older, wearing different clothes, reaching for the same switch in a different timeline. At exactly midnight, I threw the switch. The basement plunged into darkness. The humming stopped. The temporal field collapsed with a sound like reality itself, sighing in relief. I sat in the darkness for a long time, waiting for my eyes to adjust. When they did, I saw that the sophisticated equipment was gone. In its place was just Dad's old ham radio setup, exactly as it should have been. I went upstairs to check the answering machine. It was still there, still plugged in, but the red light was off. The display showed no messages waiting. I pressed play anyway. Nothing but static. I unplugged the machine and carried it to the basement. I smashed it with a sledgehammer until it was nothing but plastic fragments and twisted metal. Then I burned Dad's notebooks in the fireplace, watching decades of research turn to ash. The next morning, I called the Burlington Weather Service to ask about the forecast for March 15th. They said it looked like it would be unseasonably warm, with no chance of storms. I sold Dad's house 3 weeks later. The new owners were a young couple from Montreal who loved the Victorian architecture. I watched them move in, carrying boxes up the front steps, laughing about their plans to start a family. I never told them about the basement laboratory. I never told them about the messages from the future. Some secrets are too dangerous to share. But sometimes, late at night, I still wonder about those other timelines. The ones where I didn't shut down the machine in time. In those realities, are the disasters still happening? Are people still receiving impossible phone calls from futures that should never have been? I've changed my phone number 3 times since then. I don't have an answering machine anymore. I don't want to risk hearing my own voice calling from a future I'm not meant to see. Because if I've learned anything from Dad's machine, it's that some knowledge comes with a price too high to pay. The future should remain unknown, mysterious, full of possibilities rather than certainties. After all, if you know exactly what's coming, what's left to hope for? I moved to the small town of Millbrook, Ontario last September for a fresh start. The Victorian house I rented came furnished, and the ornate mirror in the master bedroom was what sealed the deal for me. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall, with an intricate bronze frame that caught the morning light beautifully. The landlord, Mrs. Henderson, mentioned it had been in the house for over a century, passed down through previous owners. The first few weeks were normal. I'd wake up, stumble to the bathroom, then get dressed in front of that magnificent mirror. My reflection looked back at me as expected. Shoulder-length auburn hair, green eyes, a small scar above my left eyebrow from a childhood accident. Nothing unusual. But on October 15th, everything changed. I woke up groggy from a restless night and shuffled toward the mirror to check my appearance before heading to my new job at the local library. What I saw made my blood freeze. The woman looking back at me had my exact body, my exact posture, but her face was completely different. Her hair was jet black, cropped short in a severe bob. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and there was something cold about them that made my skin crawl. Most disturbing of all, she had no scar above her eyebrow. I stumbled backward, blinking rapidly, convinced I was still dreaming. But when I looked again, she was still there, mimicking my movements perfectly. I raised my hand to touch my face, and she did the same. I could feel my own familiar features under my fingertips, but the mirror showed someone else entirely. I ran to the bathroom mirror. There, my normal reflection stared back, looking as terrified as I felt. I rushed back to the bedroom mirror, and the dark-haired woman was gone. My regular reflection had returned. I called in sick to work that day, spending hours researching antique mirrors and optical illusions online. Everything pointed to stress, fatigue, or a psychological break. I'd been through a difficult divorce and cross-country move. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. The next morning, I approached the mirror cautiously. My normal reflection greeted me, and I felt foolish for panicking. But as I reached for my hairbrush, something in the mirror caught my eye. For just a split second, I could have sworn I saw the dark-haired woman's face superimposed over mine, like a double exposure. When I blinked, she was gone. 3 days later, she was back, and this time she stayed longer. I stood transfixed as the stranger in my mirror brushed her short black hair while I brushed my auburn locks. But what terrified me most was the expression on her face. She wasn't just mimicking my movements. She was studying me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Her dark eyes seemed to be memorizing every detail of my face, my mannerisms, my expressions. I started avoiding the bedroom mirror, getting dressed in the bathroom instead. But curiosity got the better of me. On October 28th, I couldn't resist checking. This time, a different woman stared back. She had platinum blonde hair and loose curls, pale blue eyes, and sharp cheekbones. Like the dark-haired woman, she moved with my movements but watched me with an unsettling intelligence. I began documenting each appearance in a journal. The blonde woman appeared for 3 days, then vanished. Next came a redhead with freckles and amber eyes. Then a brunette with a heart-shaped face and a small mole on her chin. Each stayed for several days before disappearing, only to be replaced by another. The women were becoming more detailed, more real. I could see every eyelash, every pore, every subtle expression. Worse, they were beginning to show emotions that didn't match my own. While I stood frozen in terror, they would smile. While I felt confused and frightened, they appeared calm and calculating. By November, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The women were starting to appear in other mirrors throughout the house. First, I glimpsed the dark-haired woman in the hallway mirror as I passed by. Then the blonde appeared in the kitchen window's reflection as I washed dishes. They were no longer confined to the bedroom mirror. I called Mrs. Henderson, demanding to know the history of the house. She was evasive at first, but when I pressed, she admitted that the previous tenant, Emma Walsh, had moved out suddenly after only 2 months. Before Emma, there had been Jessica Chun, who'd lasted just 6 weeks. And before Jessica, there was Rachel Thompson, who'd fled after a month. All young women, all single, all had left without explanation. Mrs. Henderson reluctantly gave me Emma's phone number. When I called, Emma's voice was shaky, distant. "The mirror," she whispered when I mentioned the house. "You're seeing them too, aren't you?" Emma told me her story. It had started the same way. Different faces in the mirror, each more real than the last. But then things had escalated. The women had begun appearing when she wasn't looking directly at the mirror. She'd catch glimpses of them in her peripheral vision, standing behind her, watching her sleep. "They're not reflections," Emma said, her voice barely audible. "There's something else. Something that wants to replace us." The line went dead. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, acutely aware of the mirror's presence across the room. Around 3 a.m., I heard something that made my heart stop. The sound of footsteps on the hardwood floor. But I was alone in the house. I forced myself to look toward the mirror. In the dim moonlight, I could see a figure standing in front of it. But it wasn't me. It was the dark-haired woman. And she wasn't bound by the mirror's surface. She was standing in my bedroom, solid and real, wearing my nightgown. She turned toward me, and I saw my own face superimposed over hers like a fading photograph. She smiled with my lips and spoke with my voice. "Thank you for letting us in, Amanda. We've been waiting so long for someone like you." I bolted upright, but she was gone. Just the empty mirror reflecting my terrified face. The next morning, I started packing, but as I folded my clothes, I noticed something wrong. My hands looked different. The fingers were longer, the nails shaped differently. I ran to the bathroom mirror, and my reflection was normal, but something felt off. The face was mine, but the expressions felt foreign, like I was wearing a mask. I called in sick again and spent the day watching myself in various mirrors throughout the house. Slowly, I began to notice subtle changes. My smile was different, more calculated. My eyes held a coldness that hadn't been there before. When I spoke, sometimes I heard an unfamiliar inflection in my voice. On my final night in the house, I woke to find all the women standing around my bed. The dark-haired woman, the blonde, the redhead, the brunette, and dozens of others I'd never seen before. They stood in perfect silence, all wearing identical expressions of patient hunger. "We've been collecting faces for so long," the dark-haired woman said. "Each woman who looks into that mirror gives us a piece of herself, and now we have enough pieces to make ourselves whole." I tried to run, but my body wouldn't obey. I looked down at my hands and saw them flickering between my own and the dark-haired woman's. My reflection in the window showed my face morphing and shifting between all the women I'd seen. "Don't fight it," the blonde whispered. "You'll still exist. You'll just be shared." I woke up the next morning feeling different. Empty. When I looked in the mirror, I saw my face, but it wasn't quite right. Sometimes, when I wasn't paying attention, I'd catch glimpses of the other women's features bleeding through. My smile belonged to the blonde. My eyes sometimes held the redhead's warmth. My voice carried the brunette's accent. I moved out that day, but it was too late. The women had taken pieces of me, and I had taken pieces of them. I was no longer entirely myself. Now, 6 months later, I'm writing this as a warning. If you ever rent a house with an antique mirror, if you start seeing unfamiliar faces in your reflection, leave immediately. Don't stay to investigate. Don't try to understand. Because once they start collecting your pieces, you can never get them back. I look different every morning now. Sometimes I'm Amanda from Toronto. Sometimes I'm Emma from Vancouver. Sometimes I'm Jessica from Calgary. And sometimes I'm women whose names I never learned, whose faces I never saw in that mirror. We're all here, sharing this body, sharing this life. And every morning, I wake up wondering which one of us will be in control today. The mirror is still in the house in Millbrook, waiting for the next woman to look into it. And when she does, we'll be ready to collect her pieces too. After all, we're always looking for new faces to wear. Listen, I need to get this down before I lose my mind. Maybe writing it out will help me make sense of what happened. Or maybe it won't. Either way, I can't keep it inside anymore. 3 weeks ago, I saw a Craigslist ad for a house-sitting job in Vancouver, just across the river from Portland. The pay was too good, $800 for 2 weeks. The listing was simple. Modern home in quiet neighborhood. Property will be vacant. Must be comfortable staying alone. I met the owner, Robert Chin, at a coffee shop. He looked normal, polite, British accent. Gave me the keys and a brief rundown. Check the house, respond to emails. Sometimes the plumbing or lights act up, he said. The house was beautiful, sleek, modern, empty. A massive TV, spotless kitchen, and barely furnished bedrooms. It was quiet, peaceful. Then the email started. The first odd one came on Thursday. Please check the basement door at 3:17 p.m. Also, avoid using the upstairs bathroom between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. Plumbing issue. Weirdly specific, but I did as told. Basement door seemed fine. That night, I heard water running upstairs. The bathroom I'd been told to avoid. Next morning, if you hear footsteps upstairs between 2 and 4 a.m., this is normal. We have a cat trapped in the walls from construction. Don't be alarmed. A cat in the walls? The footsteps I heard weren't a cat's. They were slow. Human. I stayed up and heard them. Precise steps moving between rooms for 2 hours. More emails followed. Please don't approach the figure you may see. She scratches when cornered. Also, lights might flicker. Electrical problem. That's when I began to panic. I called Robert, but it went to voicemail. I emailed back, no reply. I went upstairs to check things out. Everything looked normal, until I noticed wet footprints on the hardwood. Human-sized, coming from the bathroom. I packed my things, ready to leave. That's when I got another email. You're handling things well. Just residual energy. The previous owner died peacefully in the house. Nothing harmful. I'll double your pay if you stay. I stayed. That night I set up a camera to catch whatever was happening. I dozed off on the couch and woke to the sound of my laptop closing. It had been shut by someone. An email popped up minutes later. Please don't record. The energy reacts badly to documentation. Stay downstairs, lights on. Don't look directly at anything in your peripheral vision. Then the lights went out. My phone died. The house was dark, silent, until I heard footsteps, this time from the basement. They came up the stairs, crossed the kitchen, into the living room, stopped right in front of me. A whisper, "You shouldn't be here." I ran, drove to a diner, and sat until sunrise. Then more emails. Don't leave the house. The energy follows people who flee. You're at Miller's Diner on 4th. Come back. Blue Honda Civic, license plate 847 GPK. You have 24 hours to return. I drove straight to the police. They took my report, but weren't too concerned. That night, while staying at my friend Emma's apartment, we heard soft knocking at the front door. Then later, from the back, I got a text. "Let me in, Tyler. You can't hide." We called 911. The police came, found no one. The next morning, I got a call. It was Robert, the real one. "I never hired you," he said. "I've been in London. Someone's been using my name. The house, it has crawl spaces, hidden rooms. I just found out someone's been living inside it." I was frozen. "I met you. In person." "That wasn't me." Another email came through. "You're making this difficult, Tyler. The house is mine. I need someone to keep up appearances. You were perfect." I had to know. Emma came with me. We parked a block away and approached the house. Inside, I found signs someone had been living there. A used coffee cup, indents in the cushions. In the master bedroom closet, behind a false wall, was a small door. It opened to a hidden crawl space. Inside, a mattress, laptop, boxes of food, and photos of me sleeping, eating, dressing, all taken through vents. There was a document open on the laptop. Tyler profile. Every detail of my life was logged. At the bottom, responded well to isolation. Good long-term candidate. Then I heard footsteps downstairs. I texted Emma to call the police. The man came up the stairs, calling my name. I peeked down. He looked normal, middle-aged, clean-cut. "I'm Robert," he said with a smile. Well, using his identity. "What do you want?" "A roommate. I've been alone too long. The house is perfect. Quiet. Private." I heard sirens. His smile dropped. "That's unfortunate." He lunged up the stairs. I ran into the bedroom, slammed the door, shoved the dresser in front. But he was already pushing it open. I climbed out the window and dropped onto the bushes below. Twisted my ankle, but I ran. The police found the hidden room, the surveillance gear, but not him. He was gone. The real Robertson died years ago in London. The man who posed as him, he's still out there, using job ads to lure people in. I changed my number, deleted my accounts. I check the locks 3 times every night. But I still get emails. "I'm still looking for a roommate, Tyler. The house is waiting. Please, if you see a house-sitting job that pays too well, walk away. The house is never really empty." I never believed in the supernatural until I moved to Vancouver 3 months ago. My name is Marcus, and I'm a 26-year-old streamer who plays horror games for a living. The irony of what happened to me isn't lost on anyone. My apartment is on the 7th floor of an old building in the downtown core. The rent was cheap, which should have been my first red flag. The landlord, Mrs. Chun, seemed eager to get someone in there quickly. She kept mentioning how the previous tenant had left suddenly, but I didn't think much of it at the time. The streaming setup was perfect. Large windows provided natural light during the day, and my gaming chair faced away from them, giving viewers a clear shot of my reactions. I had my webcam positioned on top of my monitor, angled just right to capture my face and a bit of the room behind me. Everything was normal for the first month. My viewer count was growing steadily, and I was making decent money playing the latest indie horror titles. My audience loved my genuine reactions, especially when jump scares caught me off guard. If only they knew what was coming. The first incident happened on a Tuesday night in October. Vancouver had been hit by a massive thunderstorm, the kind that rattles windows and makes you question your life choices. I was streaming the Dark Pictures anthology to about 200 viewers when the chat started going crazy. "Marcus, behind you. What is that thing?" "Dude, turn around." I paused the game, confused. "What are you guys talking about?" I asked, spinning around in my chair to look behind me. Nothing. Just my bed, dresser, and the rain-soaked windows. But the chat was relentless. Screenshots started pouring in. In each one, there was a dark figure standing near my window, tall and possibly thin, with what looked like long arms hanging at its sides. The quality was poor because of the webcam's low-light performance. but there was definitely something there. I pulled up my stream overlay to check the webcam feed myself. My blood ran cold. There it was, standing motionless about 6 feet behind me, just at the edge of the frame. When I turned around to look with my own eyes, nothing was there. It's probably just a shadow from the lightning, I told my viewers, but my voice cracked. The chat was split between people freaking out and others claiming it was a hoax. I ended the stream early, claiming technical difficulties. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept the lights on and positioned myself so I could see the entire room. Every time lightning flashed, I expected to see something standing there. But there was nothing, just the sound of rain against glass and my own paranoid breathing. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been a technical glitch or an optical illusion. Webcams are notorious for creating false images in low light. I even Googled webcam shadow artifacts and found dozens of explanations that made perfect sense. But then it happened again. 2 weeks later, another storm rolled through the city. I wasn't streaming this time, just editing some footage from earlier in the day. The webcam was still on because I sometimes record reaction videos. I glanced at the preview window and froze. It was there again, the same dark figure, but this time it was closer, maybe 4 feet behind my chair, standing perfectly still. The detail was clearer now, and what I saw made my skin crawl. It wasn't human. The proportions were all wrong. Too tall, too thin, with arms that seemed to stretch down past where its knees should be. I spun around so fast I nearly fell off my chair. Nothing. The space behind me was empty. Just my unmade bed and the window showing the stormy night outside. I rushed to my computer and saved the webcam footage. When I played it back, frame by frame, I could see the thing gradually appearing as the lightning grew more intense. It didn't walk into frame. It just manifested, like it was being assembled from shadows. The rational part of my brain kept insisting there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was pareidolia, a tendency to see patterns in random stimuli. Maybe the combination of lightning, rain on the window, and low light conditions was creating a persistent visual artifact. But deep down, I knew better. There was something in my apartment that only appeared during storms, and only my webcam could see it. I started researching the building's history. The Vancouver Public Library's archives revealed some disturbing information. The building was constructed in 1962 on the site of an old boarding house that had burned down in 1961. 7 people died in that fire, trapped on the upper floors when the wooden staircase collapsed. One of the victims was a man named Thomas Whitmore, described in the newspaper as unusually tall and thin. He had been living alone in room 7B for over a decade, the room that was now my apartment. I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence. Lots of people are tall and thin, but the more I researched, the more unsettled I became. Thomas had been a recluse, surviving on odd jobs and the charity of his neighbors. People described him as strange and unnaturally quiet. Some claimed he had an obsession with storms, often standing by his window for hours during thunderstorms. 3 weeks passed without incident. No storms, no mysterious figures. I almost managed to convince myself it had all been in my head. I even started streaming regularly again, though I kept the lights brighter and positioned my camera differently. Then came the storm of November 15th. I was playing Visage, a psychological horror game about a house with a dark history. The irony wasn't lost on me. About an hour into the stream, with nearly 500 viewers watching, the chat exploded. Marcus, it's back. Holy shit, it's moving. Call the police. I didn't even turn around this time. I just looked at my webcam feed. There it was, closer than ever. Maybe 2 feet behind my chair. And for the first time, I could see its face. It didn't have eyes. Just dark, hollow sockets that seemed to absorb light. Its mouth was a thin line, neither smiling nor frowning. Just empty. But the worst part was how it was looking directly at the camera. Not at me, but at the camera itself, as if it knew people were watching. My hand shook as I reached for my phone to end the stream. But before I could, the figure moved. It tilted its head, a slow, mechanical motion that made my viewer count spike as people shared clips in real time. The chat was chaos. People were recording everything, taking screenshots, creating clips. Some were convinced it was an elaborate hoax. Others were genuinely terrified. A few claimed they could see similar figures in their own homes now. I ended the stream abruptly and sat in my chair, afraid to turn around. The storm raged outside, lightning illuminating my apartment in stark, brief flashes. I forced myself to look behind me. Nothing as always. But when I looked back at the webcam feed, it was still there. Closer now. I could see the details of its impossibly thin frame, the way its shoulders were too narrow for its height, how its arms seemed to end in hands with too many fingers. I grabbed my laptop and ran to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. Even there, I could hear the thunder rolling across the city. I called my friend Jake in Toronto, babbling about what was happening. "Marcus, you need to get out of there," he said after I showed him the footage. "I don't care if it's real or not. This isn't healthy." But I couldn't leave. Where'd I go? And what if it followed me? I spent the night in the bathroom, checking the webcam feed every few minutes. The figure remained in my bedroom, standing motionless behind my empty chair. Sometimes it would move slightly, adjusting its position, but always staying just within the camera's frame. When morning came and the storm passed, it vanished. I tried to go back to normal streaming, but my audience had changed. Word had spread across social media. People joined my streams just to see if the figure would appear again. Skeptics came to debunk it. Believers came to witness it. And everyone in between came for the spectacle. The worst part was the waiting. Every weather forecast became a source of anxiety. I started obsessively checking radar maps, dreading the sight of storm systems moving toward Vancouver. The next manifestation happened during a stream 2 weeks later. This time I was ready. I had set up multiple cameras around the room, borrowed some proper lighting equipment, and even had a friend monitoring the stream from his apartment. When the storm hit and the figure appeared, I was prepared to document everything. But what I captured was far worse than anything I had imagined. The figure was right behind my chair now, so close I should have been able to feel its presence. Through the webcam, I could see it leaning down, its face inches from the back of my head. Its mouth was open now, revealing rows of teeth that looked like broken glass. But the most terrifying part was what happened next. It raised one of its impossibly long arms and pointed directly at the camera. Not at me, but at the lens itself, as if it was pointing at everyone watching. The chat went insane. People were reporting that they could feel something watching them through their screens. Some claimed to see shadows moving in their peripheral vision. Others said their pets were acting strangely, hiding under furniture and refusing to come out. I couldn't take it anymore. I spun around in my chair, determined to confront whatever was behind me. But as I turned, I felt something cold brush against my neck. Just for a moment, like frozen fingers trailing across my skin. The figure was gone when I looked at the webcam feed again. But something had changed. I could feel a presence in the room now, even when it wasn't visible. The apartment felt different, colder, as if something had marked its territory. That night, I made a decision. I was going to leave Vancouver. I'd break my lease, abandon my streaming career, and start over somewhere else. Somewhere without storms, without shadows, without things that existed only in the space between reality and observation. But as I packed my belongings, I found something that made my blood freeze. Under my bed, carved into the wooden floor, were words. Fresh scratches that definitely hadn't been there when I moved in. "I see you watching." I called Jake immediately. "I'm coming to Toronto," I said. "Tonight. I can't stay here." "What happened now?" he asked. I told him about the message, about the feeling of being watched, about the cold touch on my neck. He listened without interruption, then said something that chilled me to the bone. "Marcus, check the weather in Toronto." My hand shook as I pulled up the forecast. A massive storm system was moving across Ontario, expected to hit Toronto within hours. "It's not tied to your apartment," Jake said quietly. "It's tied to you." I looked at my webcam, still running, still recording. In the preview window, I could see myself sitting at my desk, phone pressed to my ear. The room behind me was empty, but I could feel something watching, waiting. Thunder rolled across Vancouver, and I realized with growing horror that I had never been the one streaming to an audience. I had been the audience, watching something else perform, and now it knew I was watching. The storm was coming, just like it always did, and this time, I understood that no matter where I went, it would follow, because it wasn't haunting a place. It was haunting me. As lightning flashed outside my window, I saw my reflection in the black screen of my monitor. But behind me, barely visible in the reflection, was the outline of something tall and thin, something that had been waiting decades for someone to finally see it, something that now had an audience of thousands, watching through screens across the world. And as the thunder crashed overhead, I realized that everyone who had watched my streams, everyone who had seen the figure, had become part of something larger, a network of observers, all connected by the act of witnessing. The figure appeared on my webcam one last time, clearer than ever before. It looked directly into the camera, directly at me, and for the first time, I saw it smile. Then the power went out, and I was alone in the dark with something that had been waiting 70 years for someone to acknowledge its existence. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the sound of rain against my window, and the feeling of two long fingers gently closing around my throat. When the police found my apartment 3 days later, after my worried viewers had called in welfare checks, they found my streaming equipment still running on backup power. The webcam was recording an empty chair, an empty room, and a message carved into the wall behind where I used to sit. Thank you for watching. They never found my body, but sometimes, late at night during thunderstorms, streamers across the world report seeing a tall, thin figure standing behind them in their webcam feeds. And when they turn around, they find fresh scratches on their walls, spelling out the same message. The figure is still watching, still waiting, and now it has an audience that spans the globe, because once you see it, it sees you back, and the storms never stop coming. I've lived in Maple Heights apartments in downtown Toronto for 3 years now, and I know every inch of this building. 22 floors, gray concrete walls, and an elevator that groans like it's dying every time you press a button. But yesterday morning, when I stepped into that familiar metal box, there was a button I'd never seen before. 6.5. It sat there between floors 6 and 7, glowing with a soft amber light that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. The brass was polished to a mirror shine, completely unlike the worn, tarnished buttons surrounding it. I stood there for a full minute, finger hovering over the button for my floor, the 8th, while staring at this impossible addition. My name is Marcus Chun, and I'm a software engineer who notices details. I notice when my neighbor Mrs. Patterson changes her doormat. I notice when the corner store switches brands of milk. I sure as hell would have noticed a new floor button appearing in an elevator I ride twice daily. But there it was. I pressed 8 and rode up, my mind racing. Building blueprints don't lie. Maple Heights has a ground floor, 21 residential floors, and a rooftop access. There's no floor 6.5. There never has been. That evening, I decided to investigate. I waited until after midnight, when the building grew quiet except for the usual sounds. Mr. Rodriguez's television through thin walls, the ice machine humming on every third floor, and the occasional footstep in the hallway above. The elevator came with its usual mechanical wheeze. The 6.5 button was still there, glowing softly in the darkness. I pressed it. The elevator shuddered, more violently than usual, and began its descent. But something was wrong. The floor indicator showed we were passing floors in the wrong order. 8, 7, 6, 5, 6, 6.5. The doors opened with a soft ding that echoed strangely, as if the sound was being stretched through a long tunnel. I stepped out into a hallway that shouldn't exist. The corridor was identical to every other floor in the building. Beige walls, brown carpeting, fluorescent lights humming overhead. But the air felt different, thicker, like breathing through wet cotton, and there was a smell, faint but distinct. Ozone and something sweet, like overripe fruit. There were 4 apartment doors, just like every other floor. 6.1/2A, 6.1/2B, 6.1/2C, and 6.1/2D. But these doors were different. They were older somehow. The wood was darker, the brass numbers more ornate. They looked like they belonged in a building from the 1920s, not this modern complex built in 2018. I approached 612A and pressed my ear to the door. Silence, but not the empty silence of a vacant apartment. The deliberate silence of someone holding their breath. I knocked softly. "Hello? Is anyone there?" The silence stretched on. Then, from behind the door, came a voice I recognized. "Marcus, is that you?" It was Jennifer Walsh from 12B. She'd lived in the building for 2 years, worked as a nurse at Toronto General Hospital. I chatted with her dozens of times in the lobby, helped her carry groceries. But Jennifer had moved out 3 weeks ago. I'd seen the moving truck myself. "Jennifer, what are you doing here? I thought you moved to Vancouver." "I did move," came her voice, muffled through the door. "But I'm back now. I'm home." Something in her tone made my skin crawl. Too flat, too emotionless. "Can you open the door?" "I can't do that, Marcus. But you can come in. Just turn the handle." I reached for the brass doorknob, then stopped. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I had to know. The door opened with a soft click. The apartment beyond was exactly like mine, down to the layout and the cheap laminate flooring. But it was wrong in ways that made my eyes water to look at. The walls seemed to curve inward at impossible angles. The windows showed not the Toronto skyline, but a sky that was too dark, filled with stars that moved in slow, hypnotic patterns. Jennifer sat in the center of the living room, in a chair that faced the door. She looked exactly as I remembered, auburn hair, green eyes, the small scar on her chin from a childhood accident. But she was too still, too perfect, like a photograph that had learned to breathe. "I've been waiting for you," she said without moving her lips. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Jennifer, what is this place?" "Home," she said, and now her mouth moved for a fraction of a second after the words. "It's where we belong, where we've always belonged." I backed toward the door, but it had closed behind me. The handle turned uselessly in my hand. "You can't leave yet," Jennifer said, finally standing. Her movements were too smooth, like she was floating rather than walking. "You haven't met everyone." The other doors in the hallway began to open. From 612 became Thomas Hartwell, the accountant from floor 15, who disappeared 2 months ago. His family had filed a missing person report. The police had found no trace of him. From 612C emerged Maria Santos, the art student from floor 3 who'd vanished just last week. Her paintings were still hanging in the lobby, part of a resident art show that would never be taken down. From 612D walked Derek Morrison, the retired teacher from floor 19. He'd been missing for over a month. They all looked perfect, unchanged, but their eyes held the same empty stillness as Jennifer's. "Welcome home, Marcus," they said in unison, their voices creating a harmony that resonated in my bones. I pressed myself against the door, fumbling for my phone. No signal. The screen showed only static. "There's no need to call anyone," Jennifer said, approaching slowly. "Everyone you need is here. Everyone you've ever needed." The hallway began to stretch, growing longer and longer. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting dancing shadows that moved independently of their sources. The carpet beneath my feet felt soft and yielding, like I was standing on something organic. "What do you want?" I whispered. "Nothing," said Thomas, his voice carrying the same eerie resonance. "We're complete now. We're home." "But you're not real," I said, my voice cracking. "You're missing. You're gone." "We're more real than we've ever been," Maria said, her young face serene. "We're exactly where we belong." They were surrounding me now, moving in that strange, floating way. I could smell them, not the normal human sense of soap and coffee and life, but something else, something that reminded me of old books and copper pennies. "The building chose us," Derek said, his weathered hands reaching out, "just like it chose you." "Chose me for what?" "To be complete," they said together. The walls began to pulse, like a heartbeat. The floor beneath my feet grew warm and soft. I realized with growing horror that the building itself was alive, and floor 6½ was something like its stomach. I lunged for the elevator, my hand slapping against the call button. The doors opened immediately, as if they'd been waiting. I threw myself inside and hammered the button for the lobby. The elevator shuddered and began to move. Through the closing doors, I saw my 4 neighbors standing in the hallway, watching me with those empty, perfect eyes. "You can't leave," Jennifer called out, her voice following me down the shaft. "You'll be back. They always come back." The elevator descended past floor 6, 5, 4, but instead of stopping at the lobby, it continued down. B1, B2, B3, basement levels that didn't exist. Finally, it stopped at a floor labeled simply 0. The doors opened onto my apartment lobby, but it was wrong. The furniture was in the same places, but everything was slightly off. Colors too vivid, angles too sharp. The potted plants were too green, too alive. They seemed to watch me as I stumbled toward the exit. Outside, the city looked normal. Cars passed by. People walked down the sidewalk. Life continued as if nothing had happened. But I could feel it watching me from the windows above. I could feel floor 6.5 waiting. I checked into a hotel that night, then another the next day. I called in sick to work, told my friends I was dealing with a family emergency. But the pull was constant, like a fish hook in my chest, tugging me back toward Maple Heights. On the 3rd day, I couldn't resist anymore. I found myself standing in front of the building, key in hand. The doorman nodded at me as if I'd never left. The elevator was waiting, doors open. The 6.5 button glowed softly, pulsing with that familiar amber light. I pressed it. This time, Jennifer was waiting in the hallway. She smiled, and for a moment, she looked genuinely happy. "I knew you'd come back," she said. "I knew you'd understand." Understand what? That leaving was never really an option. Behind her, the other doors opened. Thomas, Maria, Derek. They all stepped out, and I realized there were more now. Mrs. Patterson from floor 4. The new tenant from floor 11, whose name I'd never learned. People I'd seen in the lobby, in the elevator, in the halls. "How many?" I asked. "Everyone who belongs," Jennifer said. "Everyone the building has chosen." I looked down the hallway and saw that it stretched much farther than it should. More doors, more numbers. 6.5 E, 6.5 F, 6.5 G. They seem to go on forever. "What happens now?" "Now you choose," she said. "You can fight it, keep running, keep feeling that pull in your chest until it drives you mad. Or you can accept it. You can come home." I thought about my life outside, my job, my friends, my small apartment with its view of the parking lot. I thought about the constant noise, the stress, the endless cycle of work and sleep and loneliness. Here, in this impossible place, there was peace. There was belonging. There was home. I stepped forward. Jennifer's smile widened, and for the first time since I'd found her, it reached her eyes. "Welcome home, Marcus." The door to 6.5 E opened, and I saw my apartment inside. Not a copy, the actual apartment, somehow transported to this place between floors. My books, my computer, my coffee mug still sitting on the kitchen counter where I'd left it 3 days ago. I walked inside, and the door closed behind me with a soft click. Through the window, I could see the city below, but it was different now. The lights were softer, the sounds muted. People moved through the streets like sleepwalkers, going about their lives without ever looking up at the building that watched them. I sat down at my computer and opened Reddit. My fingers moved across the keyboard as if guided by something else. The elevator in my apartment complex goes to a floor that wasn't there yesterday. I typed. Residents start vanishing after visiting a mysterious floor labeled 6.5. One tenant decides to investigate before it's their turn. I posted the story and waited. Within an hour, the first comment appeared. "This is fake, right? Please tell me this is fake." Then another. "I live in an apartment building too. We don't have a 6.5 floor, but lately I've been having dreams about one." And another. "There's a button in my elevator that I swear wasn't there yesterday. It's labeled B1/2. I smiled and closed the laptop. The building was growing, reaching out through the story I'd shared. Soon, there would be more neighbors, more friends, More people who understood what it meant to belong. Outside my window, the city continued its endless dance, and I watched with eyes that had learned to see the truth. Some buildings choose their residents. Some elevators go to floors that exist only when they're needed. And some stories, once told, become real. The button glows softly in elevators across the country now. 6.5 be 1/2. 13.5, different numbers, same destination. Home. If you're reading this, and you've seen a button that wasn't there yesterday, remember, you always have a choice. You can ignore it, move away, pretend it doesn't exist. But the pull will always be there. The knowledge that somewhere, between the floors you know and the floors you don't, there's a place where you belong. A place where you're complete. A place where you're home. The elevator is waiting. The button is glowing. All you have to do is press it.